evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 33rd year, I interview writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. It's a slightly wider net than that, however. We have had on other artists. We have had on sculptors, painters, musicians, actors. So if you have an idea for a writer or other brand of artist who might be a good guest for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the credits. We'd be glad to look at your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming out of 1623 studios is a result of cable access television. It's a wonderful community asset that you don't get if you find other means of accessing the internet, like Dish. I wouldn't know what those are, but I've heard about them. Don't go to Dish. Stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. Tonight, I'm very happy to say we do have a writer, a nationally known, nationally acclaimed writer who lives right here in Gloucester by the name of JoeAnn Hart. JoeAnn, welcome to the Writer's Block.
Well, hi, John. Thanks for having me back again.
Welcome back to the Writer's Block.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Just before the show, we were talking about your latest exploit.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with short stories.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
So in the past couple of weeks, I found out I won. Literary world is small. Not many people would know. I won the Hudson Prize, and it was for short fiction. So I won it for a collection of short fiction called High Wire Act and Other Tales of Survival. Because in the past few years, I mean, starting with Float, my writing has gone very environmental, you know, and climate fiction. And so Float my novel was very much of a climate fiction book. But then I turned and did a memoir for a long time. And then, but in between, I was always doing short stories and sending them out. And they became progressively more focused on the climate. And so the whole collection is very much fiction based on climate and the environment and a lot of animals. There's a lot of animals.
Would you repeat the title and then tell us when you expect to see that out?
Yep. Called High Wire Act and Other Tales of Survival. It's going to be out by Black Lawrence Press in September 2023.
So approximately a year from when we're recording.
Yep.
Little less.
Yep.
Good, congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you now a short story writer or a novelist?
Yes, I know. So I have always done everything. I mean, I've always done a little bit. I used to say I used to do everything except for poetry, because I do novels, I do short fiction, I do essays, journalism, memoir, and then one day, and I've done drama. I've done a bit of drama as well. And then one day I wrote a poem, and it actually got picked up by literary magazines. So now, I'm a one poem poet.
So you can take multiple honors at the Olympics.
The triathlon.
Yeah. You mentioned memoirs, and I want to talk about your latest book. Mm-hmm. And our director Tyler is going to show the book cover. The latest book is Stanford 76.
Yeah.
And he's showing that now. Can you tell us about that? And that's your first book of memoirs.
Yes.
So it's essentially a documentary.
Yes.
That's right. Can you give us just a brief profile of that?
Yeah. So Stanford 76, it's got a very long, cumbersome title. I don't know if you know, authors actually don't choose their titles. And this University of Iowa Press chose this title. Stanford 76, a true story of murder, corruption, race, and feminism in the 1970s. And so that's what it's about. I had a brush with murder when I was like 19 or 20. Somebody I knew was killed by bow and arrow, and her crime was never solved. And a few weeks after she was found, she'd been dead for a while. After she was found, her boyfriend was robbed a liquor store and was shot dead by the police. And so and she was white, and he was black. And so many years later, I started thinking something was very funny about the whole thing. And so this is Stanford 76 is like my journey back and going. It was 20 years of research for this.
20 years.
20 years going back to the Stanford Advocate, the newspaper in Stanford, and looking up the old articles. I mean, there was so much I hadn't understood at the time. And then, like 1 week or under after Howie was killed by the police, the entire police department gets busted because they are being run by the Gambino family out of New York City. So the police chief on down, everybody is busted. So and I had never put two and two together, but in fact, both, it was just, there was a lot of mob business going on around me I didn't understand.
So anybody who wants to read your view on who actually
on who actually killed her.
Killed your friend has to get the book.
Yeah.
Did you discover in your research how many bow and arrow deaths there are in the United States?
Hardly any, because there's few enough that I couldn't even find. That usually there are accidents, because it's, hunting accidents is, and there's not many of those. They don't often end in death. It is very hard to kill somebody with a bow and arrow. It's not like a gun.
I would imagine.
It's like so pretty much they can't really be a moving target. They have to be tied up.
It would have to be a crossbow, maybe, too.
And probably a crossbow. They are not even sure. There's so little known about bow and arrow murders. They are not even sure whether it was a crossbow or a regular bow. Yeah.
So they don't have
the arrow was broken off in her body, so they don't have the shaft, which might have told them something.
Makes me
but
think
it was
of,
a hunting bit. Hunting.
Makes me think of Deliverance.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by the 20 years of research.
Mm-hmm.
When I just finished one of Dickens' novels. When I read him, especially because I love him, I can't imagine dealing with that kind of volume.
Right.
700 pages, 750 pages. It was Dombey and Son. How do you control your drive to stay on something for 20 years?
Yeah. So that was an issue, and so, I'd start the research and look at articles and then be stunned by what I read and have to put it aside. And then, I'd do something else. Like I wrote Float in that time.
So you mean an article on your subject?
Yeah,
you're doing
yeah.
the
Well,
research
yes,
for.
I was doing the original, reading the original newspaper accounts of what had happened. And it so didn't match my memory that I, would have to process it and simply put it aside and write something else. And then so it's like I went back and forth for 20 years of, getting more information. The police files were gone. They were, what happened mysteriously disappeared in the police department, which is not surprising considering how corrupt it was. So I would just do other things. I just wouldn't be able to take it anymore, like the not knowing, the not understanding, and just put it aside and write a short story, And I wrote a novel during that time. So it was, and then I talked to people. Everybody, of course, was dead by the time I finally picked up the phone and called around to old friends. They were pretty much dead.
I wonder, my next question was there any backlash, or was there any complimentary reaction?
Yes, a lot of police have contacted me, who knew everybody back then, and I had already been in contact with the couple of police who were still around, and then other and people who work in City Hall now contacted me. I've been to Stanford for a lot of events, and There isn't anybody who said, no one has said, no, that isn't how that could have happened. No one. Everybody says, oh yeah, that's probably what happened, because there's very few, there's very few options of what could have happened. Although I didn't know that when I was young. I was oblivious when I was young, and I had a certain story in my head about how it all went down, and everything about what I thought was wrong. Everything.
So often true of our youth.
Yes.
And many,
As is so
many,
true of
many
our
other-
youth.
many
That's right.
others, yeah.
Yeah, because you just don't want to believe.
So I want to repeat the title because
Yeah.
I want to urge our audience to buy it.
Mhm.
Stanford 76. I won't read the
Yeah.
subtext. Stamford, not Stanford. Stamford 76.
Yeah.
And you have seen the cover online. I want to also go to some of your other work
Yeah.
because you are nationally recognized, nationally acclaimed author.
Mhm.
We're lucky to have you in town here. I'm going to hold these up
Right.
to.
Right. And I brought that just
I'll
because
use
I'm in that.
Okay, I'll use this. I'll use that camera,
Yeah.
Tyler. Okay.
Yeah,
Now-
so that's a new anthology, came out last year. Just to sort of, I'm in it. I have a piece of climate fiction in there. So I'm often in climate fiction anthologies, and that's a recent one because it's like people are trying to figure out what's going to happen with the climate. And sometimes the easiest way is through imagery and word imagery. And so people do turn to stories about the changing climate rather than scientific studies, which are hard to swallow and understand.
Difficult to read.
But people, a good story, it helps
Yes.
people understand what's going on.
Yes, I know there is a lot of money and a lot of prizes offered to poets and others who are writing on climate topics.
That's right.
I have looked at some competition for poets, and it's for older poets, and it's for poets living in the East, and it's about trees. The work must be about trees.
Must be about trees. Trees are having a comeback.
They are. Float. And
Float.
you mentioned Float a couple times.
Yes, so Float is a novel actually published by an environmental press in Oregon. What year? I don't know, 2013. So that one is set in Maine,
Yes,
2013. That one's set in Maine, but it's very much like Gloucester. Geographically, Maine and Gloucester are very similar. And it's a dark comedy about plastics in the ocean. So I became an anti-plastics warrior during the writing of that book.
Maine and north coast, the eastern coast of Maine and Gloucester are very similar, as you say. The
Yeah.
granite.
Granite, it's a
constant inlets.
Yeah.
and-
Geologically, they are the same, as opposed to south of Boston, where it becomes a whole different geological unit. But we are at the terminal moraine, the rocky thing,
Yes,
and then that
yes.
ends.
It's always striking to watch even my little beach, Magnolia Beach. You get down to the end of the beach, and the red granite's coming up at an angle of about 45 degrees off vertical. How did that happen?
Yeah. Oh.
Now, Addled,
Yeah.
I believe you were speaking about Addled
Mm-hmm.
when you were on the show
Yes.
before.
So what year? So yes, that was my
Yeah.
first novel, but about 2007.
07.
07. It's hard because, you write these things, takes a long time to write them, and then they get picked up by a publisher and they might sit on them for 2 years. So then it's hard to remember what year. But Addled is a social satire about that deals a lot with vegetarianism, which I am not, but it's a lot about food issues and the politics of food and the invasion of Canada geese on a country club. So.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, Canadian geese.
Yeah.
Crap like
Yes.
unbelievably.
Oh, I know. It's less. I knew all the statistics. I think it's something like 2-3 pounds a day per bird. I mean, it's just
that can ruin a lot of golf courses.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Addled. Thank you for bringing those
Yeah.
back. And I know they must be all available on Amazon.
Oh, they're all available, and
Okay.
even I
So
think the
we'll
bookstore probably carries
tell our
some.
audience to
Yeah.
get out there.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you an environmentally
Mhm.
semi-relevant question. Did you see the movie Don't Look Up?
Oh, yeah.
And what did you think of it?
Oh, I loved that movie.
you?
I just loved it. And during the pandemic, we watched so few movies, but our attention span has been like, old sitcoms. But I watched that. I just loved it, and um, it was like so real. Like that people. I think people don't understand, the science, and it gets twisted around, and um, and that there will be, if we don't pay attention, we will be destroyed or living on another planet. As
And coincidentally, here in October, we just hit an asteroid with a rocket. I don't think it moved it anywhere.
It actually did. They
it?
found out yesterday. It took them a couple of weeks to figure out had they moved it enough. Apparently, just nudging it an inch or so was enough to set it from its trajectory, just enough so that it didn't hit whatever mark they had set. So they were just trying to see, like, was it possible? Could we deter an asteroid from coming, and how much pressure would it take? So it was actually very good news yesterday.
Proof of theory.
Proof of it, yeah. That
so even if you move something a few inches here, a million miles later, it's...
That's right, and that's what they proved. So NASA's very happy. And that's science. We have to believe in science, because science is going to save us, one way or another.
Yes. I was very glad to see recently that Alex Jones was hit for about $1 billion, and it should be should be more.
Yeah.
And people who distort science, and
Exactly.
you read about a study that followed 5,000 people for 20 years to learn this little bit of information about heart, about the muscles in the heart.
Yeah.
And then somebody online will say, "Oh, try this."
I know.
With all the background of a grade school student.
That's right. Everybody doing their own research. Yeah.
Over a beer,
Yeah.
or multiple beers.
Yeah.
I always like to ask guests a little nuts and bolts question or two.
Yep.
Do you write every day, and what are your general disciplines?
Yeah. So I am a very disciplined writer, and the goal is always to get in that chair early in the morning. Get at my desk early, like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and just write till noon. And so that's my goal. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's grandmother duties, sometimes there's livestock issues, or, there could be a number of things. But that is my goal, is to get there and just to work.
And do you sit in a desk for a certain number of hours?
Yes. My goal is to, like, a 3-hour stretch, is to just to write.
I asked Tim O'Brien, whom I knew from Breadloaf, once about his writing schedule. He said, sit in a chair and put in your butt time.
That's it.
It's a big term, butt time, because lightning strikes if you're prepared.
That's right.
Some days it doesn't, some days
it doesn't, but you don't know. You just have to sit there and just wait for the muse.
Right.
And there's always busy work. If nothing is forthcoming, I just do transcribe notes that I've taken, or when I read a book, I use sticky notes to remember, like, great sentences or fun facts, and then I'll just transcribe notes. And sometimes just in that process of writing down observations, something will come. Something I just write in a journal, or I have there's lots of things.
You don't know, yes.
Yes, you don't know what's going to happen.
I want to segue now from talking about your success as a writer to writing here in Gloucester, and your other important function is to chair the literary committee, overseeing and kind of coordinating literary events connected with our great birthday next year, 2023.
Right.
Can you tell us about that committee and what you're doing?
Okay, so I am the chair of the subcommittee of the General Arts Committee. So I'm the subcommittee for the literary committee, and so we we have been meeting for years already. It seems like like a full year before the pandemic. Um, and so basically, I gathered up writing organizations here in town, and like the T.S. Eliot Foundation, the Writers Center, of course, and Beth at the library is sort of our overseer because she
Beth
oversees
Pocock is the chair of the
of the arts.
General Arts Committee.
Yes, so we are one of her subcommittees, and so she amazing. And here they're moving the library, and now we don't have a library for 2023. But oh well, yeah. So she oversees like drama, so the theater and the arts and the literary, and we are the literary. And so we just try to talk to one another about, I encourage the organizations to do more of what they usually do and to focus it on the history of Gloucester, of history of Cape Ann. And so we will be having, there'll be events all through the year focused on the Heritage Weekend next October. It will be more cultural stuff. So as opposed to seafaring stuff, which is earlier, it's all good stuff. But we're going to be doing our bigger stuff in the fall, and then little things during the year. We are trying to, get away from, focusing all our efforts on like white male writers. No offense, John, but just like there is other voices out there who we have not heard.
There are.
Yeah, and the 400 stories is great. We are actually not part of that, but we funnel people to that. And the Writers Center is very involved in the 400 stories. If you don't know 400 stories, go to the 400 website, and anybody can upload a story about there.
Have you done anything for 400 stories?
I haven't done it yet, but I've got to think about who to do.
It's fun.
Yeah, you've done one?
I did one.
Yeah, for you?
Profile of Gus Foote.
You did, that's great.
I
Yeah,
did.
so that's a really interesting thing.
They're wonderful stories.
They're
I found
wonderful
myself
stories.
reading about somebody's parents long gone,
Right.
whom I didn't know, by a writer I don't know. I
Right.
find myself tearing up about the
No, they're just
sincere
beautiful.
emotion.
Yeah.
We need some sincerity.
Yeah, so now we've got Terry Weber from the Writers Center is now really devoted to getting 400 stories done and getting them, helping people edit them and write them and upload the photographs and things like that. So we are also like trying to, that there were the people living here long before the Dorset Company came. Oddly enough, 2023 is not celebrating the anniversary of the incorporation of Gloucester. It celebrates, if you can use that word, commemorate, a dozen white colonists from England, the Dorset Company, arriving at Stagefort Park. And that big plaque there on the boulder in Stagefort Park, that's what we're celebrating. And we don't know why, but because it had been the incorporation for, like 250 years, but sometime between the 250th year and the 300th, they moved it forward 17 years to celebrate that instead of the incorporation of the city. So heads up, we're still going to have to celebrate the incorporation of the city in a few years. So we want to bring attention to that, to the voices, people who lived on this land before that. And
I think in terms of diversity, I think you told me when you and the other committee members were on a show last season that the women had one function in the 1923
that's right.
tercentenary was to arrange the flowers.
The flowers. That was the only committee the women were allowed on, the flower committee, for all the galas, because it was just one ball after another. I think there is still going to be a gala. We have nothing to do with that, but starting the year in January and then ending the year, there'll be some sort of events. but it seems like in that one, which was like 1880 something, it took them also 10 years to get the book produced. So the book came out 10 years after the actual event. So the dates are screwy, but anyway. So we're just trying to like bring more awareness to like in the women often they're the only legacy that women have are off and written or sometimes just verbally or it's like cooking. So we're focusing on things like that, on where legacy and culture comes down in
Yes, I
Yeah.
think people are often shocked to know that there were slaves here. There were free African Americans as well as slaves here.
Yeah.
And the indigenous people were, to say it in the mildest way, treated badly.
Yeah.
And there were rewards for scalp
Yeah.
to males, to white males,
Yeah.
rewards for bringing in scalp.
Yeah.
Frightening stuff.
It is frightening. It is really frightening. And so there is Miranda Aisling at the museum is, she's really helped develop the diversity of the committee itself, the 400th, on what the focus should be. And that also wrote up a land use statement that before every 400th event that we are being asked to read the land use statement of the people that we're having this event on the land of, the peoples who had lived here over the past 10,000 years.
Yes, yes.
So,
When before we discovered it.
yeah, discovered it.
And we're just past Columbus Day.
Right.
Columbus Day.
Columbus Day,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
I know, but even then, the Vikings were here. Leif Erikson was here,
That's it, yes.
Norway celebrates Columbus Day. They celebrate Leif Erikson Day of
I
discovering it.
noticed we are almost out of time. This
Yeah.
half hour went very quickly. I enjoyed it very much.
Mhm.
I want to ask you a final quick
Yeah.
question. What one word of advice or one sentence of advice would you give to young writers who would like to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah. Well, find good teachers, find good mentors and teachers in Gloucester. You can find that at the Writers Center. You can take classes, but more than anything else, you've got to sit in that chair. You can't just go around calling yourself a writer and not writing. It's not you must sit in there and you must write, one way or another. Find a book of prompts, just find a way to sit in that chair and write.
And I've often found a recommendation added to that. When you first write whatever you're writing, write it by hand. on
That's a
paper.
really good
Get
one.
the brain
Yes,
and
it's really
connection.
good.
It's extremely important.
Right now, I've gotten old now. My thumb is arthritic. So now when I handwrite, I can't read it. But in fact, years ago, handwriting, and I know a lot of writers who their very first draft is always the hand.
JoeAnn Hart, thank you
Yeah.
very much for being on the Writer's Block.
Thank
I
you, John.
appreciate your time
Yeah.
and your brilliance in writing and your civic dedication.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody in television land for being with us as well. If you've learned something about writing from JoeAnn Hart, writing memoirs or writing novels or writing short stories, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.